The Hall of Remembrance aboard Vector Citadel was as cold and sterile as Trellick's design permitted, gleaming metal arches, backlit plasma etchings of battles past, and the faint, ever-present hum of containment fields. A group of young cadets sat in precise rows, their black-glassed ocular implants blinking with live feed capture. They were prepared to log another textbook lesson on asymmetric warfare and the human conflict. Then General Verlac entered. He moved slowly, the hiss of his exobrace audible with each ponderous step. Even among his kind, who revered stoicism and restraint, Verlac was a relic. Scarred chitin plating, missing 2 lower arms, and eyes that flicked once toward the cadets, then away, as if bracing against memory. "Begin recording," the instructor intoned. Verlac ignored him. He stopped before the display labeled The Human War, Cycle 871.3 to 874.7, and stared at the shifting hologram, a depiction of Earth's solar system with military engagement overlays. "We thought it would be easy," Verlac began. His voice, once commanding, was now quieter. "That was our first mistake." A murmur rose among the cadets. Verlac continued. Flashback, 871.4, the Galactic Skirmish Outer System. The first human outpost was barely more than a converted mining platform orbiting Galactic 9. Intelligence scans had labeled it non-threatening, minimally armed, poorly organized. Verlac had overseen countless such subjugations. His fleet arrived expecting a brief display of force. Instead, his warships were greeted by silence, then chaos. Inside the outpost, Captain Nilatran was already moving. Slender, dark-haired, and calm in a way that radiated steel, she surveyed the flickering comms feed from her command deck. 4 ships, Trellick's glass. No warning. No chance of reinforcement. "Eli," she said, "how quickly can we turn the recycling units into launchable projectiles?" Corporal Eli Mendoza, hunched over a dismantled terminal, didn't look up. "Give me 20 minutes and access to the kitchen's grease traps." "You have 6, she replied. Verlac watched from orbit as their scans returned nothing but system noise. EM interference. Radar ghosts. The kind of digital junk no disciplined species allowed. He assumed it was malfunction. Then the station's life support dome exploded, outward, not inward, and launched a cluster of steaming, spinning debris. One object spiraled toward his command ship. An empty water drum filled with compressed nitrogen ignited mid-spin, detonating on contact. Shields flared. Hull integrity dropped by 12%. "Sir," a sub-commander said, "they're throwing garbage at us." "No," Verlac muttered. "They're improvising." Back on the station, Nyla turned to her team. Mendoza was grinning behind oil-streaked goggles. "So, that worked." She allowed herself a nod. "Next wave won't be so easy." Kojo. Specialist Kojo Adebayo leaned against a crate of coolant canisters, sketchpad in hand. Tall, soft-spoken, and always a step outside the rhythm of the room. He held up a drawing, a caricature of a Trellick's commander crying over a spilled coffee mug. "Morale booster," he said. "Also, send it to their flagship via unsecured channel." Nyla blinked. "Why?" Kojo shrugged. "If I were an alien general, I'd be rattled by art." Before she could respond, a crash echoed from the lower deck. Private Ivanova, known only as Crash, stumbled into a room with plasma grenades strapped haphazardly to her belt and a smoldering chunk of plating on her shoulder. "Good news," she panted. "I found their boarding party." "Bad news. They found me first." "What happened?" Nyla asked. "Crash cracked her knuckles. I introduced them to our airlock. Personally." Kojo whistled. "That's your 3rd solo takedown this week." "4th, Crash said with a grin. "But who's counting?" On the Trellick ship, Verlac reviewed the intercepted transmission, the cartoon. He squinted at the crude lines, the exaggerated eyes, the absurd caption. "When you plan to conquer a species and they throw soup cans instead." "What is this?" he asked. The intelligence officer, and used such absurdity, stumbled over words. "It appears to be humor. Weaponized confusion." "Disable their comms," Verlac snapped. Too late. Their own troops were sharing it internally. Back on the outpost, The humans prepared for evacuation. Mendoza, Nyla ordered, scramble the docking guidance. Make it look like we're launching 5 escape pods. Copy that, he said, tapping on a half-melted console with the fervor of a mad pianist. Kojo, distract them. Kojo donned a cape made of emergency foil blankets and marched toward the docking bay doors. Allow me to deliver our final statement. Crash followed behind, lugging a fuel rod with a wild grin. If that fails, I'll make one hell of an encore. The humans launched a single real escape pod, barely shielded, massed among 5 false readings. Verlac's crew, overwhelmed with sensor glitches and failing pattern recognition, watched helplessly as it disappeared into the icy shadows of Galactic's orbit. Verlac stared at the wrecked outpost, now abandoned. It should have been a swift conquest. Instead, it was a humiliation. His officers wouldn't meet his gaze. "What are they?" his aide whispered. He had no answer. Back in the present, Verlac finished his tale with a slow, exhale breath. That was the first time I saw humans fight. Improvised weapons. Psychological warfare. Laughing in the face of death. They were cornered and they danced. The cadets sat silently, some visibly shaken. One raised a hand. "Sir," she asked, "did we eventually understand them?" Verlac turned away from the display. "No," he said, "and that was our second mistake." He left the hall without another word. Snow howled across the surface of Argus 9, a frozen moon locked in eternal twilight. Ice storms raked the mining colony turned Resistance hub, and the jagged peaks of glacial rock loomed like jagged teeth. At the heart of the storm, buried beneath meters of frozen alloy and repurposed scrap, a human team held their ground against a war machine that had never lost a siege. General Verlac, standing atop the command dais aboard the Trellix Dreadclaw, stared at the moon's surface through a lens of disappointment. His mandibles twitched. The siege had dragged on for 8 cycles, far longer than projected. "This should have ended 2 rotations ago," muttered Subcommander Vetch, narrowing his eye stalks. "It should," Verlac agreed. "Yet they persist, like mold in a reactor core." Inside the ice-caked tunnels of the base, Captain Nyla Tran sat hunched over a portable display, its screen flickering from the cold. Her breath crystallized in the air, but her voice was calm. "Ration count?" she asked. "Low," said Corporal Mendoza, wiping frost off a cracked inventory pad. "We can stretch it for 2 more days if we pretend soup is a meal." Crash dropped into the room, dragging a half-dismantled Trellix drone behind her. "Found this creeping through Tunnel C. It looked at me funny, so I broke its face." "You do realize they don't have faces, right?" Kojo asked from a corner, perched on an overturned crate and scribbling in his notebook. "Then I broke whatever was trying to be a face," she said cheerfully. Nyla allowed herself the faintest of smiles. "We'll repurpose the parts." "Mendoza?" He was already opening the drone's chassis. "Oh, yeah. I can get this thing running backward and sideways by midnight. We'll turn it into a decoy, called the Angry Snowman." Kojo looked up. "Or perhaps a mobile sculpture of futility. A metaphor." Crash blinked. "You lost me." Nyla didn't. "We'll use it as bait." That night, the Angry Snowman rolled into the open snowfield like a drunken ballerina, its movements jerky, its profile exaggerated by discarded parts to look twice as large. It stumbled toward a Trellix patrol, speakers blaring static and fragments of Beethoven. The aliens paused, confused. Then, before he could scan it, the machine exploded in a concussive burst of EMP and pink dye. Mendoza's touch. Back in the tunnels, laughter echoed to the command post. "That's for freezing our boots off," Crash said, watching the feed. "Also for Beethoven," Kojo added solemnly. But outside, the war escalated. Trellix bombardments pounded the upper ice layers, collapsing access shafts. One by one, exits were buried. Oxygen levels fell. Hope, already thin, began to fracture. On day 10, the last of their thermal cores failed. The base plunged into a killing chill. Mendoza wrapped copper wire around a ventilation pipe, coaxing a tiny spark of warmth. "I used to fix Mars freighters with worse than this," he said through chattering teeth. "But usually I had coffee." Crash leaned beside him. cradling a plasma rifle. I used to fix problems with fists. Still do. He glanced at her, amused. How's that working for hypothermia? Poorly, she admitted. In another chamber, Kojo etched lines onto the icy wall with a salvaged laser scalpel. A haiku, steel birds in the dark, chatter of gods in our ears. But still we breathe frost. You're writing poetry while we freeze to death? Nyla asked quietly as she approached. He didn't turn. If I'm going to die, I'd like to do it in verse. You're not dying, she said, voice hardening. We hold until reinforcements arrive. No matter what. He looked at her then, really looked. And if they don't, then we make damn sure they regret every step they take onto this moon. Trellix forces advance with exosuits and thermal-cutting weapons, carving through layers of glacier-like surgeons. Verlac watched from orbit, troubled. The humans had no air support, minimal supplies, and dwindling energy. Yet they fought with an absurd intensity. Sensors registered movement beneath the surface. Faint, erratic, not enough for troops. What is that? Vetch asked. Verlac magnified the feed. A fake heat signature, moving in circles. It was Kojo, dragging a bundle of heaters and reflective foil, wrapped in a synthetic cloak. The sensor spoof was crude, but it worked. Trellix fire teams began converging on his location, abandoning a main tunnel just as Mendoza detonated behind them. The final act came without warning. On day 13, Trellix forces breached the command center, only to find it empty. Holographic figures flickered in the darkness. Pre-recorded voices shouted orders, giving the illusion of a full human platoon. Confused, the Trellix soldiers advanced slowly, until one noticed a phrase scratched into the wall. Nice try, Bugs. The ceiling collapsed in a controlled detonation, trapping the strike force. The real human team was hidden deep in the base, where Mendoza had rerouted power to launch a single flare beacon through the ice. Minutes later, the faint signal was caught by a passing Terran patrol. Reinforcements dropped like avenging angels. Back in the present, Verlac stood before the same group of cadets, his voice low. They should not have survived. They were cold, starving, outnumbered, but they never stopped improvising, never stopped thinking. A cadet raised a hand. How many did they lose? 3, he said. Out of a squad of 10, only 3. And how many Trellix forces were lost? Verlac's mandibles twitched. Too many. There was a pause. Then he added, almost reluctantly, and they named the Operation Snowball Punch. The cadets blinked. I don't understand, one said. You're not supposed to, Verlac replied. He turned back to the memorial and traced a clawed finger over a crack in the glass. Below it read the words, "For those who found fire and frost." General Verlac's breath rasped louder than the filtration systems as he stared out the viewport of the Dreadclaw, watching the shattered remnants of what used to be an orbital station drift silently in space. The cadets behind him were silent. None dared interrupt. He didn't lecture anymore. He remembered. They never fought like we expected, he said at last. But it was on Mazari Prime that we truly understood humans don't just fight wars. They solve them. Flashback. The Mazari Prime incident. The atmosphere of Mazari Prime shimmered with radiation from a collapsed reactor grid. Fallout from a botched Trellix terraforming experiment. The surface was uninhabitable to most species. Most, but not all. Human engineers, backed by Terran Command, had been dispatched to rescue an abandoned science outpost. The Trellix assumed the team would never survive the descent, much less the heat-blasted terrain. They underestimated humanity. Again. Welcome to the hottest vacation spot this side of hell, Crash announced, leaping down the drop ramp as acidic winds whipped across her thermal suit. Captain Nylatran followed, clutching her rifle like a lifeline. Eli, how's the hazard filter? Running at 98%, said Mendoza, adjusting a stack of modular gear on his back. Which means we'll be fine until something explodes. Kojo, Specialist Adebayo, stood silently at the edge of a cracked ridge, scanning the distant skyline through a homemade HUD built from a child's educational visor and 3 pieces of duct tape. 4 Trellix drones in the western quadrant. Also, a weird-looking bird, he said. Might be a rock. Nyla nodded. Let's stay invisible. They didn't come to fight. Their mission was simple. Extract the data cores from the research bunker before the radiation storms made the ground uninhabitable again. Problem was, the Trellix wanted that data too, because inside that bunker was something no species had, a map of human neural chaos, thought patterns, decision randomness, a complete cognitive breakdown of how humans adapted under stress. The Trellix needed it, but the humans had one advantage. They were used to being unpredictable. Inside the bunker, thick dust clung to every surface. Mendoza coughed through his mask as he wired into mainframe, his gloved fingers dancing over corroded touchpads. I've seen museum displays more functional than this, he muttered. But if I cross-wire the magnetic sync with the heat exchanger, I can boot the main server. Won't that fry the console? Nyla asked. Almost certainly. She raised an eyebrow. Mendoza grinned. But it'll also bypass their backdoor encryption. And if I'm wrong, it'll explode and kill us all. Win-win. Crash clapped. Let's roll those dice. As the system surged to life in a flicker of sparks and desperate whining fans, Kojo activated the external monitors. He said flatly. We got incoming. Outside, Trellix strike units approached with military precision. Cold, perfect formations moving through heat-blasted canyons. They deployed sentries and jammers. They blocked escape vectors. To any normal strategist, the situation was hopeless, which is exactly why the humans smiled. What if we play dead? Kojo offered. Explain, Nyla said, already intrigued. We rig the data core with false memory echo. Let them think they've won. Then we give them something interesting. Like, Mendoza asked. Kojo turned his sketchpad around. It was a detailed schematic of a false neural map. Complex enough to pass surface scans, but just absurd enough to destabilize any AI that tried to process it. You're going to break their minds, Crash whispered, awed. No, Kojo said. I'm going to confuse them so badly they stop trusting their own algorithms. The Trellix breached the bunker minutes later. The humans were already gone, left through a collapsed maintenance shaft into a cave system too narrow for exosuits. The data core sat innocently atop its pedestal. Trellix analysts swarmed it and downloaded Kojo's gift. On board the Trellix Dreadclaw, chaos bloomed. They're laughing. Verlac had barked at his tech overseer. Why are the AIs laughing? We don't know, sir, came the panicked reply. The core data is recursive. It describes its own non-logic. They're trying to solve a problem with no end state. Shut it down. We can't. It's become self-replicating. The infected algorithm spread through Trellix systems like a virus. Nonsensical but hypnotically structured. Their drones halted mid-march, analyzing abstract poems. Predictive engines began requesting artistic input before executing attacks. One command center shut down entirely to debate the meaning of an optical illusion. They hadn't been hacked. They'd been confused. Back in orbit, Verlac had realized a terrifying truth. Humans didn't break systems by overpowering them. They bent reality until logic snapped. Back in the present, the cadets leaned forward, expressions uneasy. Is it true, one asked, that the Mazari Command AI still has a rebooted? Verlac gave a slow nod. It started composing something called a concept album, then requested legal rights as an artist. A long silence. Sir, another cadet whispered, how do we ever fight them? The general turned, his voice hollow. We didn't fight them. We studied them. And every time we thought we had learned, they became something else. Inside the Hall of Remembrance, a small digital plaque flickered beside the Mazari exhibit. It read simply, Cognition is a weapon. Humans carry theirs like a knife between the ribs of logic. The air inside the amphitheater had gone still. General Verlac's final words hung over cadets like a weighted mist, one they couldn't brush off, couldn't quite name. Silence lingered before he turned slowly, talons clicking on the stone floor. You've heard the stories, he said, but stories aren't battles. Let me tell you about the last time I saw them fight. He motioned toward the holoprojector. It flared to life an image of a blasted, sun-scorched world. Relans wound, a crater-riddled planet that had changed hands 12 times before the final siege. The Trellix were desperate to hold it. The humans? They had no intention of merely winning. They intended to end the war. Flashback. The final offensive on Relans' wound. The sky was ash. Red lightning danced between charred clouds. Bombardment had pulverized most structures into rubble. But amid the destruction, Captain Nyla Tran stood, cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders, eyes scanning the horizon. "They'll come tonight," she said. "They always do when the dust settles." Behind her, Corporal Mendoza adjusted the emitter towers they planted across a shattered plaza. "Decoys are live. If they scan us, they'll think we brought a full battalion." "We are the battalion," said Crash, cracking her knuckles. Her armor was scorched, helmet dented, but her grin hadn't dimmed. "And if this fails?" Kojo asked, perched atop a fractured pillar, sketching shapes in the dust with a bit of carbon. Nyla looked up at the sky. "Then we become myth." The final plan wasn't a grand assault. It wasn't glory or brute strength. It was adaptation. The humans lured the Trellix into believing they were retreating, broadcasting go signals, planting chatter for non-existent fire teams, crashing old drones into valleys to mimic flight paths. Every step the aliens took forward was along a path humans had drawn with ashes and misdirection. The Trellix, confident of imminent victory, overcommit and walked straight into the maze. It began with the ruins. Mendoza had reconfigured half the city's derelict infrastructure into false corridors, magnetic fields, optical illusions, automated drones running scripted arguments about supply chains. Entire strike teams found themselves walking in circles, surrounded by shifting echoes and misfiring sensors. The streets were alive with disinformation. Crash called it playing urban Tetris. They weren't just fighting soldiers. They were fighting expectations. And when the Trellix finally reached what they thought was a Terran command hub, they found a room full of mannequins made from alloy scraps and painted helmets. Standing behind them, a single human, Kojo, unarmed. He looked up from his notepad and smiled. "I've been expecting you." They didn't know what to make of him. He was reciting poetry. In chaos, patterns bloom. In silence, humans scream art. They demanded surrender. Kojo tilted his head. Then Mendoza triggered the collapse. The entire district, rigged with silent charges, came down, not to kill, but to trap. Energy nets fell into place, jamming all comms and shields. The Trellix were paralyzed, not by weapons, but by misinformation, by impossible design. That was the turning point. When reinforcements finally arrived, they didn't find a battlefield. They found a message carved into the broken city walls. We wrote, descending ourselves. Back in the present, Verlac let the final image hang in the air. A drone shot the crater capital, where 4 human figures, Nyla, Crash, Mendoza, and Kojo, stood atop a fallen Trellix banner. Not out of vanity, but as a warning. They didn't win because they were stronger, Verlac said. They won because they rewrote the rules. Because they made us think we knew them, then changed. He turned to the cadets, eyes hard. You train to analyze. They imagine. You follow patterns. They invent failure just to learn how to survive it. Silence. Then one cadet, barely more than a hatchling, raised a trembling claw. "But, sir, what do we do if we face them again?" Verlac considered. His mandibles twitched. "Respect them. Study them. And never, ever assume they'll do what you expect." Another cadet, more defiant, stood. "They broke rules. They confused. They deceived. That is an honorable war." "No," Verlac said, stepping closer. "It's human war." He tapped his temple. "And if you think honor survives extinction, you've already lost." Later, alone in the empty chamber, Verlac stood before a hologram of Nyla Tran. Her final recorded words played softly in the background. "We didn't come to conquer. We came because you left us no choice. We survived because we learned. We won because you didn't." He bowed slightly, not in defeat, but in understanding. And the last line etched in that memory space. Faint but indelible. Victory is not domination. Victory is adaptation.